Jayvardy.
Jayvardy.
This Jayvardy.
Jayvardy. Thank you, Jayvardy.
Jayvardy. Oh, Jayvardy. Oh my gosh.
I am 29 years old. This year in 2020, I am turning 30. I have been a hockey fan for the majority of my life. I was a hockey player for a large portion of my life. I live in Toronto. All that being said, it's quite clear that I am a fan of this team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. And you can see how old this jersey is. They haven't used this logo for years. And if you look at the name on the back, you can see how really old this jersey is. Mikhail Grabovski. I was a pretty big fan of Mikhail Grabovski when he was a Maple Leaf. I thought he had a lot of heart, a lot of heart and soul type player with skill. You know, I thought he was going to be a little bit better than what he ended up turning out to be, because he did have a really good first couple of years with the team, but he was a little bit older when he joined the team. He was already in his mid-20s at that point. But this video isn't about Mikhail Grabovski. This video is about the 2019-2020 Toronto Maple Leafs and the Brendan Shanahan run Toronto Maple Leafs specifically. So tonight, the Maple Leafs and the Columbus Blue Jackets finished their best-of-5 series to enter the official playoffs for the 2020 playoffs, and the Maple Leafs got shut out. They lost 3-0 to lose the series in Game 5. Columbus is going on to play Tampa Bay. Toronto, who already is in home because this game was in Toronto, the hub city is in Toronto. Toronto is leaving. They're leaving the hub network that the NHL has set up, and they are going to their individual homes. Toronto's out. They're done. Columbus has advanced. It is time to really reconsider what this team is and what it's capable of doing. Now, like I said, I've been a Toronto Maple Leaf fan for a long time, but before we get, I need to tell a quick story here, because in 2004, after the 2004 lockout, when the NHL returned from their one-year layoff, I was 13, 14 years old at the time. I'm born in 1990. So when they came back from their one-year layoff after the 2004 lockout, I became a fan of another team. So I've been a fan of two teams ever since then. This was the team that I became a fan of, specifically because of this guy right here, number 8, Alex Ovechkin. He is my favorite player. Growing up, my two favorite players were Eric Lindros and Matt Sundin of the Toronto Maple Leafs after the lockout when I was a teenager and the NHL returned from that one-year break. This guy, Ovechkin, became my favorite player. So I've been a Leaf fan my whole life, and I've been a Capital fan for the last 15 years because Alex Ovechkin is in his 15th year as a Capital. I know what it takes to win a Stanley Cup as a Capitals fan. Not me personally, but as a fan, I know what it takes to have a team that you cheer for. I know what it takes for a team to win a Stanley Cup. I watched every single Capitals playoff game that Alex Ovechkin has ever played in. And specifically in 2018, when they won the Stanley Cup, I watched every single playoff game. And I saw a lot of ups and downs. It took Alex Ovechkin 13 years, because he won at age 32. Took him 13 years to win the Stanley Cup. 13 seasons to win a Stanley Cup. Auston Matthews is in his 4th year. It's not time to completely panic. Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, these guys are young. They still have a lot of growing to do. Like I said, it took Ovechkin 13 years to finally win a Stanley Cup. Matthews and Marner have time. They do. It's not time to completely panic. But this team is not working. This team that Brendan Shanahan has assembled is not working. This team that Kyle Dubas has assembled is not working. Matthews and Marner have time. I know as a Capitals fan, it takes time to win a Stanley Cup. Not every player is Jonathan Taves. Not every player is Sidney Crosby. You're not always going to have your team win a Stanley Cup in the first 5-6 years of, your elite players playing. It takes time most of the time. Look how long it took St. Louis to finally win a Stanley Cup with Alex Pietrangelo. I don't have the year offhand, but he's played for that team for 10 years before he won a Stanley Cup. It takes time. For the majority of the time, it takes time. But that being said, it's not working. This team is a one-dimensional team that is not capable of winning. They lost to Washington in the first round. They lost to Boston back-to-back years in the first round, and now they are officially known as missing the playoffs. And if the pause didn't happen, it is quite possible that the Leafs wouldn't have made the playoffs in the first place because Columbus was only 1 point behind them in the standings. This team is a one-dimensional team, and one-dimensional teams do not win in the playoffs. They don't. When the Capitals won the Stanley Cup, they had a lot of things go right for them, but one of the standout things to me is how important the bottom six forwards were in that run. Lars Eller was astounding in that playoffs. He ended up scoring the Stanley Cup winning goal, but even before that, he was incredible. Devontae Smith-Pelly isn't even playing in the NHL right now, but in that year, in that playoff run, he was a borderline superstar. That's what it takes. You need your bottom six guys like a Lars Eller and like a Devontae Smith-Pelly, like a Tim Connolly who's no longer with the Capitals. Guys like that all played incredible. Chandler Stevenson, no longer with the Capitals, but these are players that all stood out in that playoff run. Tim Connolly, Devontae Smith-Pelly, Lars Eller, Chandler Stevenson all stepped up and played major roles in that team winning the Stanley Cup. Alex Ovechkin played his best hockey I've ever seen him play in his entire career in the playoffs that the Capitals won the Stanley Cup. This is a guy who, at that point in his career, I saw score 50 goals on 7 different occasions. 7 different occasions he had scored 50 goals, and I told my now ex-girlfriend, at that time during the playoff run, she was actually my ex. We were actually broken up at that point too, but that's not the point. The point is, when I was talking to her about that series and that playoff run in general, I was saying Alex Ovechkin is playing the best hockey I've ever seen him play as a fan of the Capitals. Auston Matthews did not play his best hockey this playoffs. He did not play his best hockey last playoffs. He is still young. He has time. But he did not step up his game the way that Ovechkin stepped up his game when the Capitals won the Stanley Cup. The Leafs' bottom six, they don't have a bottom six capable of winning a Stanley Cup. Here's the thing. The Leafs forward group, everyone talks about the strength of the Leafs forward. So my batteries died on the camera, so that's why there was a cut there. But like I was saying, the Maple Leafs have a one-dimensional forward group. We always talk about the strength of the Leafs forward group, but it's a one-dimensional forward group. They don't have really any players that are standout physical players except for Kyle Clifford, who has not been with this team for that long and is a free agent, and who knows if he's going to come back. And if he does, he's probably going to cost quite a bit of money, and the Leafs don't really have cap space. Plus, he didn't really make a difference in this matchup against Columbus anyways. They don't have any really defensive-minded forwards, where Mitch Marner is arguably the Leafs' best defensive-minded forward, but here's the problem. Mitch Marner is supposed to be a first-line scoring winger who's supposed to focus on offense. We can't rely on Mitch Marner to be playing against the other team's top line in a shutdown role and exhausting himself on the penalty kill when we need him to be a first-line scoring forward. Do you know the amount of energy it takes to kill penalties? Why are we having Mitch Marner, who we need to score, and we got shut out in 2 games this series, remember? Game 1, the Leafs got shut out against the Blue Jackets. Game 5, tonight, they got shut out against the Blue Jackets. Why are we having Mitch Marner expel energy on the penalty kill when we need him to put up points and score goals? And it's kind of sad that Mitch Marner is probably the best defensive-minded forward on the Leafs, because it just shows that they don't have defensive-minded forward players. They don't have players that have physicality as their number one skill. Look, and let's look at all of the players, because I am convinced that the makeup of the Leafs forward group is all too similar. It's one dimensional. They don't have enough diversity in their forward group. Zach Hyman. What is Zach Hyman really known for? He's known for being a hard worker. Like he is a hard worker. He's very professional. But what is his number one ability? Is it defensiveness? Like, I don't think Zach Hyman is like a Selke winning worthy forward. Is it scoring? Well, he's not a 30-goal scorer either, and he's not a point-a-game player. It's not hitting. He's not known for being the best hitter in the league. So, like, what is Zach Hyman? Is he, like, a little bit of everything? Well, if he is, like, you know, if you're a little bit of everything, that's fine, but then you're a master of nothing, and that's the point. We don't have any players that are masters at being defenders. And look at who we have playing in the bottom six, specifically in this game and this series. Jason Spezza. Jason Spezza's at the end of his career, and before this year, he's been a scoring forward his entire career, and now we sign him to be a veteran presence on the team and ask him to play a bottom six role. This is a guy who through his entire career was a scoring forward, and now we're going to expect him to be Mr. Bottom six matchup player. It's not going to happen. Pierre Engvall. Pierre Engvall is a fringe NHL player. How many of the teams, the official 16 teams that are now in the playoffs, how many of those teams would Pierre Engvall make? How many of those rosters would he make of the 16 teams that are officially in? How many of those teams would he make? Maybe Montreal because of where they finish in the standings. But like other than them, who would he make? I don't see him playing on Chicago. Maybe Arizona, but like that's it. Like we're talking about teams that are shouldn't be in the playoffs in a regular season. But the point is, Jason Spezza, scoring forward his entire career, he's not going to be, Mr. Matchup. Pierre Engvall is a fringe NHLer at best. Nick Robertson is an 18-year-old kid who hasn't even played a single regular season game in the NHL. Alex Kerfoot is a good player, but he kind of has that Zach Hyman effect going on. What is he a master of? He's not a masterful scorer. He's not a masterful matchup player. He's not a masterful hitter. What is he? Ilya Mikheyev, who everybody talked about how great he was in the Leafs training camp before the hub cities, and how he was their all-star of their warm-ups before the play-in round. He was kind of invisible this entire series. I thought Mikheyev at the beginning of the regular season looked pretty good, and apparently he was the Leafs' best player in their warm-up before this play-in series, but he was pretty much invisible against Columbus. Kasperi Kapanen, he's a scorer. He's a skating, puck possession scorer, but we're asking him to play in the bottom six. The point is, the Leafs don't have a proper bottom six, and bottom six is super important to win a Stanley Cup. They don't have a Lars Eller. They don't have a Tim Connolly. They don't have a Devontae Smith-Pelly. They don't have a Chandler Stevenson. They don't have those type of guys. They have guys who are fringe NHL players like Pierre Engvall, guys at the end of their career who were scorers like Spezza, and guys like Kapanen who should be top six players, but because the Leafs' top six is so stacked, we're asking him to play in the bottom six. This is the problem with the Leafs roster. It's not made to win. This all-out offensive strategy is not a winning strategy, and it's been proven. How many examples do we honestly need before we really confront the reality that this team is just not constructed for the playoffs? How many people need to come out and say that this team is not constructed for the playoffs for MLSE to actually get it and do something about it? And we all know the Leafs' defense is bad. And when Jake Muzzin went down, to be honest, I knew the series was over as soon as Jake Muzzin got injured in Game 2. Even though the Leafs won that game, I knew that the Leafs were not going to win the series without Jake Muzzin. They just were not going to be able to do it. And Morgan Rielly is a really good player. but he's not a defensive-minded defenseman. He's an offensive-minded defenseman, and that's the problem with the Leafs. It's all 100% offense, and 100% offense does not win in the playoffs. You wonder why the Leafs do so well in regular seasons, but they always collapse in the playoffs. It's because of how the roster is constructed. We just talked about how they have players in the bottom six who are not traditional bottom six players, and in the playoffs that becomes a big problem. The Leafs defense, we all know how bad it is. Tyson Barrie was a fail, let's be honest. Nazem Kadri was a heart and soul player with grit and intensity that the Leafs were really lacking this year. That trade of Kadri for Barrie, I understand the reason why the Leafs traded Kadri. He kept getting suspended at important times, but he was a player they really missed. And Tyson Barrie, he was a failure as a Leaf. You know, you can talk about, you know, maybe how he didn't gel with Babcock, and you know, maybe that he was asked to be something that he isn't really supposed to be anyways when he came to Toronto. Like, we can try to make excuses for him, but the point is he was a failure as a Leaf. Cody Ceci is a guy who's a fringe, probably 6-7 defenseman on most teams in the league, who was getting paid $5 million. This was not a contract that the Leafs signed. They traded for it, and they traded out Zaitsev to acquire this contract, and the reason they did that is because Zaitsev had several years. Ceci's in his final year, but the point is Cody Ceci was being paid like a top four defenseman, played like a top four defenseman. He was, by both Babcock and Sheldon Keefe, he was put into a top four defense position, but in reality he's a number 6 or number 7 guy. On most teams, most winning teams, he's probably a number 7 or number 8 guy, but for the Leafs he really should have been a number 6, 7, but by both coaches this year he was forced into a top 4 role because the Leafs simply don't have the defensive depth to have anybody else up there. Travis Dermott is the same player as Morgan Rielly. He's not as good as Morgan Rielly, but he's the exact same player as Morgan Rielly. Justin Hall, again, a fringe NHL player, number 7 on most teams, probably number 8 on most teams. He didn't even really make the NHL until he was, 25, 26, and that's kind of a red flag for me as it is. If you're that old when you're first making the NHL, it's probably a good sign that, you know, you're not going, that you've probably already peaked. And the Leafs, we all know the defensive problems, but the forward group is one-dimensional and not constructed to win. They have bad defense with no defensive depth, and Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin, I imagine, will both be full-time Leafs next season. Sandin will probably be in the lineup every night. Liljegren will probably be a number 6, number 7 guy for most of the season. I don't see Liljegren starting next year with the Marlies. He'll probably be like that number 7 guy who rotates in and out of the lineup for the start of the year at least. But I mean, those two kids, we're going to be relying on Sandin. I'm not sure if Sandin will still be considered a rookie next year or not, but the point is even if they're not considered rookies, they're still just sophomores. You're not going to rely on 2 second-year players to completely turn your defense around. So the defense needs fixed, and they don't really have the cap space to do it unless they trade one of their big players, which I don't think they will unless they bring in a new general manager, because I don't think Kyle Dubas has the guts to make a big move like that. The forward group is not constructed to win, and Frederick Anderson, I'm not going to put this on Freddie. I think Freddie is a good goalie, but I will say this. As a Capitals fan, I did not see Frederick Anderson step up his play the way Holtby always does in the playoffs. Holtby is a pretty, above average goalie in the regular season, but every playoffs he really steps up his game. And even before the Capitals won a Stanley Cup, Braden Holtby would always elevate his game in the playoffs and play out of his mind, so to say, as the goaltender for the Capitals. And Frederick Anderson has been a Leaf for 4 years now. And those 4 years, the 3 years that they played Boston and Washington and this year against Columbus, Frederick Anderson did not elevate his play from regular season to playoffs in any of those series, in my opinion. So I'm not blaming this on Freddie. I think he is a good goalie, but he did not elevate his game. The defense is bad and needs fixing. The forward group is one-dimensional and not constructed to win. And Freddie Andersen has not proven that he's able to elevate his game. And I want to check how old he is because I don't know offhand. How old is Frederick Anderson?
30 years old.
He's 30 years old, so he's probably born in 1989. So he's probably turning 31 soon. I don't know when his birthday is, but let's be honest, he's probably peaked. I mean, how many goaltenders get better after the age of 30? I mean, goaltenders, it's not like a forward or defenseman where, at 30 is when you start to see kind of a slow decline. Goaltenders can usually last longer than that. I mean, he probably has another solid 3 to 4 years of, being a number one goalie left in him. But he's probably peaked. I mean, if he has 3 to 4 years left as a number one goalie, is he going to get better in those 3 to 4 years? Probably not. And like I said, he hasn't proven that he has the ability to elevate his play in the playoffs. The Leafs are not constructed to win. That's the point. And to circle back to what I was saying at the beginning of this video, Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner, they have time. Those two are not the problem. They do need to play better in the playoffs, but part of that is Mitch Marner needs to not be asked to be killing penalties and playing matchup roles. He needs to be asked to be a number one scoring forward. And Matthews, he needs to learn how to elevate his game, and he has the ability to do so. He needs to learn to step it up a notch in the playoffs. And he hasn't done that. He hasn't really shown that he's done that either. Like Freddie Andersen hasn't shown he's able to elevate his play. Neither has Auston Matthews. Auston Matthews has had a handful of good games in the playoffs in his career so far, but he hasn't had that one series where he was the best player in the series, and that's a problem. He needs to be the best player in the series. In this series with Columbus, the best player was between Pierre-Luc Dubois and Zach Werenski. Problem is, they're both Blue Jackets. Matthews needs to be the best player in a series. If the Leafs are going to be a playoff contending team, Matthews needs to be able to be the best player in a series, and he has never done that. He's still young and he has time, but he needs to prove to himself, to his teammates, and to the rest of the league that he has the ability to be the best player in a playoff series, something he has not done in his short career so far. Does he have the ability to do so? Yes, but he needs to prove it probably as soon as next year that he has the ability to do that. In the meantime, the Leafs really do need to start making serious changes. They really do. And for me, it starts at the top. The Shana plan hasn't worked. It hasn't. And Kyle Dubas, people will say he's been general manager for 2 years. He's been part of the management team for over 5. One of the very first moves that Brendan Shanahan did as president of hockey operations was name Kyle Dubas an assistant general manager to the team and eventually the general manager of the team. In the 2 years that Dubas has been GM, he's mismanaged the cap. And it's not just Tavares, it's not just Marner, it's not just Matthews, it's not just Nylander. Those 4 contracts were all signed by Dubas, and they're all problematic contracts. The only one that you can maybe give a pass to is Tavares, because he was a free agent that wasn't Leafs property, and they were probably in a bidding war anyways. So that one you can maybe give a pass to, but the point is, I don't even think Tavares was a good signing for the Leafs anyways. And I'll give 2 reasons for that. One, I think Matthews felt like he was being looked over as a number 1 center at the time, and I think Riley felt like he was being passed over as captain at the time because we all pretty much assumed that Tavares would be captain after he signed with the Leafs, and it took a year for that to happen, but it did. I really think that they'll never say this out loud, but I really do think that Matthews and Riley, those 2 players specifically, probably didn't want John Tavares on the team, or probably felt like, maybe not that they didn't want him on the team, but probably felt like they didn't need him on the team. And maybe they were rubbed the wrong way with him being brought in. But the Matthews contract is a problem. They should have been able to get him for 10 flat or below 10. Marner should have definitely been below 10. He's a winger, not a center, and he's never won any major awards or anything, so he should have been below 10 for sure. Nylander, probably they should have got for about 6 flat instead of 6.9 or whatever it is he's getting. But it's not just them. I think the Justin Hall contract is overpriced, which was signed by Dubas. I think the Jake Muzzin contract is overpriced because of the Leafs cap situation. That was signed by Dubas. I think pretty much every contract that Dubas has signed has been overpriced, and he's mismanaged the cap as GM. And in his whole tenure as part of the management team, the Leafs, they haven't climbed up a level. Other than that first year with Matthews where they went from being a bottom team to a playoff team, other than that year, they haven't shown that they have the ability to take the next step. And they tried firing the coach, that didn't work. Now what it is it's Shanahan and Dubas. Their plan has not worked out, and the team that is currently constructed is not constructed properly to win. So my suggestion is fire Brendan Shanahan, fire Kyle Dubas, fix the bottom 6. So I'm thinking Andreas Janssen or Kasperi Kapanen need to go on a trade. I'm thinking Spezza needs to be shown the door. I'm thinking Pierre Engvall needs to be like a 13th forward at best. I'm thinking that maybe one of Marner or Nylander should be traded as well. And I'm thinking that if they target any free agent forwards this season, it needs to be players that are completely different from the type of players that they have. And if they do trade out players like Kapanen, Janssen, Kerfoot, maybe Mikheyev, if they do decide to trade one of Marner or Nylander, they need to acquire defense. They need to acquire role players that are either defensive-minded or physical-minded forwards to play in the bottom 6. And in my opinion, they need to acquire a third-line center that has the ability to play against the other team's top line, like a Lars Eller type, who not only was a good third-line matchup player, but was also able to step up into a second-line role when Nicholas Backstrom got hurt. They need that type of player, and I don't think Kerfoot is it. So for me, Shanahan needs to go, Dubas needs to go. The bottom 6 of the forwards needs to be reconstructed, I should say. The defense, good luck. That's all I'll say. And Freddie, I don't know, man. Like, number 1 goalies are hard to come by, but he's got to prove next year that he can step up. And if he can't step up, next year is his last year as a Maple Leaf in his contract. I would say maybe it's time to move on from him as well. So, anyways, I'm a pretty unhappy camper right now as a Leaf fan. I do have some hope for the playoffs, though, for these guys. Hopefully we get to see a second Stanley Cup by them. That would make me very happy. But in terms of the Leaf fan inside me, very disappointed. And it starts with Dubas. It starts with Shanahan. And the players should not be let off the hook. If the Leafs do fire Shanahan, if they do fire Dubas, if they even look into firing Sheldon Keefe, which I think would just kind of be like, okay, like, it doesn't really matter. Neither Babcock or Keefe got anything out of these guys anyways. The players should not be let off the hook. But it does start at the top for me. But anyways, I'm just rambling on here. The point is that the Leafs have major problems, and it's time that we all actually face that reality, and it's time that MLSE actually does something about that reality, because this team, as it's currently constructed, will never win the Stanley Cup.